Okay, Cloud Gurus, let's go ahead and start looking at a demo involving logging into AWS via AWS SSO. Now, this is also starting to be called AWS Identity Center, but you might see either or in the exam. However, no matter the term, they mean the same thing and therefore the same service. In this demo, we're going to cover a few different things. And for a lesson breakdown, we're going to go over the demo scenario really quickly, and then we'll have a quick wrap up. So let's go ahead and look at the demo scenario. Now, in this demo, we're going to be leveraging an enterprise AWS SSO integration with a third-party vendor for our identity provider. The CISO at SuperDuper LLC has put out a mandate stating that the entire organization is going to move away from using the Active Directory federated services that are currently in place now for access. Instead, we're going to shift to leveraging AWS SSO, otherwise known as AWS Identity Center, and we're going to leverage a third-party integration for our user control, and then we're going to access our AWS account with SSO. Now, in this demo, what we're going to do is we're going to verify the components of SSO and make sure they've been created within our team accounts. Now, we can assume they work if we can even log in the first place, but we want to look at what actually gets created within the account itself whenever this service is set up at the organizational level. And we're going to do that in a variety of ways. We're going to perform some management console actions, mainly looking into IAM, and then we're also going to look at how we can leverage the CLI using our credentials via SSO. So let's dive into that now. Okay, welcome back, Cloud Gurus, to this first part of this demo scenario. Now, what you didn't see, and I'm not going to show due to security issues, I've logged into our third-party identity provider, which is Okta in this instance. Once I'm in here, you can see we have this AWS integration. Now, what this is going to do is allow me to sign into my AWS accounts using this third-party vendor service that we've implemented. So when I click this, it's going to open a new tab and log me in. So I'll select it. It's verifying between AWS and our third-party IDP. It's saying, yes, he is who he says he is. He's validated with us. And there we go. I now see my AWS accounts. Now, in this case, I only have one assigned to me. But if I open this dropdown, we're going to see I have an admin permission set. So this is the one role I've been given access to. Now, if I click this, I can go into my management console. It's assigning me into that account, which is basically assuming that role. And there we go. I've now signed into my account, all via AWS SSO, which ties back to our third-party IDP, which is Okta in this demo. Okay, so we made sure that works. But let's just go into IAM and let's verify or look at the pieces that get created from within SSO into our organizational accounts. Okay, so we're in this account, this demo account. And let's go ahead and look at identity providers. Now, how AWS Identity Center works, or AWS SSO works, is it creates an identity provider in every single organization account that exists within your AWS organization. So as you can see here, we've created one, and this was automatically created by our SSO instance in the main account. If I click it, let's take a look at what's inside. Okay, so once we're in here, you can see it just gives us the detailed summary and the metadata information. So all this is containing is our metadata information saying, hey, I trust our SSO implementation, and that SSO implementation is actually configured to use our third-party IDP. Again, there's a lot more details. I just can't show you them because that would be a security issue, but you can read on a lot of different white papers and the technical documentation for SSO to see how this works in more detail. The long story short is that it maps back to our SSO instance, which is in the main account, and then that SSO instance maps to our third-party identity provider, and that's how the trust chain works. Now let's just see what gets created from SSO. What I'm going to do is I'm going to filter on admin, and we can see this one right down here, admin permission set. Now I'm not going to click this, but you can see that the name has admin permission set in it. It's reserved SSO, so this is the prefix that comes along with any AWS SSO created permission sets and roles. And then we can see it trusts the identity provider that we just looked at. So in the trust policy, it contains this IDP. Now permission sets in single sign-on are implemented as IAM roles in the accounts that are used. It's a bit of a confusing terminology in my opinion, but that's how it works. You configure permission sets, you assign those permission sets, and then you assign users to those permission sets, which map to IAM roles in the accounts. Okay, so this is working. That's awesome. We verified in the console. Let's break here, and I'm going to pick right back up in the CLI, and let's see how we can leverage AWS SSO to use short-term credentials to perform AWS API calls. Okay, welcome to the second part of this demo, where we're going to show how we can use the CLI to leverage SSO to perform actions. Now, I'm in my terminal session here, and I just want to show you one thing. Let's look at my config file that's in my AWS directory. Okay, so I'm in my config file, and we can see that we have our Estes ACG profile here, and this is for my demo account for this demo. Now, there are a few things you plug in when you're configuring this. You see we give it a start URL, the region that our SSO instance lives in, our account ID, so which account are we trying to log into. We then give it the role name, and this is our admin permission set, and then we provide the typical stuff, so region and output. So let me break out of this, let me clear my screen, and let's log in and test this out. Now, this is pretty simple. All we have to do is run AWS SSO login, and then you give it the profile name, which contains those attributes that we're looking for. So this will look at that start URL and the role that we want. So what I'll do is I'll click on enter. It's going to throw me into a browser window, but all it's doing is saying, hey, should I authorize this request? I click on allow in that browser window. And what I'm doing is once I click allow that I do authorize this request, it's going to generate some tokens for me. And there we go. We're now logged in. So when I clear my screen, what I can do now is run my commands. So I can run my AWS S3LS. Let me give it my profile that we just authenticated with. And there we go. We now see our buckets. So this is working. Another way that I could have actually tested this is by running the STS get caller identity. So if I do that, let me clear again. I'll press enter, and there we go. We get our ARN information, our ID, and our account. So we are signed in as the assumed role as expected. But let's go ahead and test one command just to really make sure that everything is working as expected. And I'm going to paste in this get role call. We're looking for our read-only role with our profile. I'm going to hit enter, and there we go. We see our role. So this is actually working, and we're using temporary credentials from SSO to make these calls. Now you're probably wondering, well, where are these credentials stored? Now, in the old version of CLI, they used to be in the credentials file within this directory, but that's not how it works anymore. Let me show you the different directories in here. And you can see there's two directories, CLI and SSO. These are leveraged for these calls. What I'm going to do is go into SSO for now. There's a cache directory, and we see we have some JSON files. Now these JSON files contain a token, which was retrieved when we authorized the request to sign in. Now I went ahead and made this test one just so we can remove some sensitive information, but it shows you how it's formatted. We have our start URL, which is made up, the region that it's in, and then we have this access token. Now, this access token is actually what's telling AWS CLI that, hey, he is authenticated for this user, and I'll show you what this maps to. So let me break out of this. I'm going to go up a couple directories, and let's go into that CLI directory. There's another cache file or folder. Let me go ahead and list in there. And you see we have a similar object list. Now, this first one is the valid one, but I made a copy again, so let's just go ahead and look at that copy. You can see provider type of SSO, and then we have a typical credentials block. So this is like when we ran it earlier in some other demos and we got temporary credentials. It's the same thing here. We're generating these temporary access key IDs and secret keys with a session token. And notice we have an expiration date which maps to that role that's in IAM. So the CLI is leveraging these tokens whenever we specify that profile that we've been using in all of our AWS calls. So we see access key ID, secret key, session token, and expiration. The normal stuff for STS credentials. Okay, that's going to do it. Let me clear this up. I just wanted to show you how we can log in with SSO, how the profiles are configured, and how we can actually verify the credentials that are being used within those hidden directories. Let's go ahead and wrap up here. We'll shift back into the presentation and wrap things up. Okay, welcome back to the ending of the presentation. Let's wrap things up with some takeaways before we move on. First things first. You can use AWS SSO for verifying access to our AWS accounts, and we saw how that works. Remember, we looked at that identity provider within IAM that gets created for all organizational accounts. That IDP maps to our SSO instance, which is configured to trust our external IDP, which we used in the beginning of this demo. What's nice is it's flexible. We can use it for console access, and we did that by testing actions within the management console, specifically within AWS IAM. But we also were able to leverage temporary credentials to test our AWS calls. Now, there is another way to get temporary credentials. We've seen that earlier on in this course. But for this demo, we went ahead and showed how you can log in via the CLI, verify those credentials via those two different files, and then also make calls when you specify that profile. And it all worked using temporary STS credentials generated from SSO because we authenticated with our third-party external IDP. And I know that's a lot of words. However, I just wanted to show you a quick and dirty way on how you can actually use the CLI with SSO. So that'll do it for this demo lesson. Let's end here, and then I'll see you all in the next one.